Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to It's Your Time Now. Thank you for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, today marks 2 weeks since Dr. Wayne Koblalsingh began his second hunger strike in a bid to have meaningful consultation with Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar on the highway reroute movement's proposal for the Debe to Mondesir part of the Point Fortin highway. But to date, the Prime Minister is still adamantly refusing to do so, saying such a meeting with Mr. Koblalsingh would be non-productive and that she had already made a decision with respect to the matter. In other words, when I speak, not a damn dog bark. Except today, the problem with that approach is sometimes when you don't change direction, you may end up where you're heading. That being said, as one would expect, there are those of us who support the movement's cause and those of us who don't. There are those of us who believe that the Gandhian philosophy may not work in Trinidad and Tobago today, and there are those of us who believe that we are unveiling an autocratic leadership disguising itself as a transformational one. Whatever the truth, it cannot be denied that the standoff between activist and Prime Minister is yet another glaring example of why there is such a desperate need for true constitutional reform today in our country. Putting aside all public relation gimmicks, condescending, derogatory remarks, and mockery aside, perhaps a good starting point would be to establish how we arrived at the standoff that is being played off before us today, which may ultimately end in the death of one of our country's leading social and environmental activists. Ladies and gentlemen, the highway reroute movement, formerly known as the Debe to San Francisco Action Committee, was established in 2005, some 9 years ago by MP for the area Rudal Munilal, when surveying work first began on the Debe to Mondesir area under the People's National Movement by a company named Trinto Plan. Having formed the residents into a committee, opposition MP for the area and chairman of the committee, Rudal Munilal, on the 6th of September 2005, led a protest at Trinto Plan's head office in Tacarigua, which resulted in the officials at the Trinto Plan and the Ministry of Works agreeing to meet with the MP to discuss the concerns of the residents. Having secured a meeting with officials, MP Munilal then asked the residents to present their own ideas by way of an alternative route for the highway, which route would result in the minimum relocation of all those who would be effective. So the fight was on. The South Orapuch residents and their opposition MPs, Dr. Tim Gopi Singh, Chandray Sharma, Prakash Ramadar, and Kamla Persad-Bissessar, who had all pledged their undying support against the cold, callous, unsympathetic, heartless PNM government, who were not concerned about the disastrous social and economic impacts of their decision on the people or the environment. That is, of course, until May 24th, 2010, when in a cowardly act of treachery, the same members of the opposition, now in government, who had once supported the residents' cause, completely abandoned them, simply stating in a published report that the Debe to Mondesir route would continue as proposed by the government. It is then, ladies and gentlemen, having been discarded as quote-unquote bags of aloo, as so eloquently described by their once chairman, and finding out themselves without representation and nowhere to turn, the residents then sought the guidance of social and environmental activist Dr. Wayne Koblalsingh, who agreed to give his full support to the committee. And only in November 2011, the highway reroute movement was formed, replacing the Debe to San Francisco Highway Action Group. From then on, Their fight has been an unwavering one to highlight their plight nationally, ultimately culminating in a standoff that has brought us to right where we started, a fight against the blatant abuse of state power and the lack of accountable representation, the frustration of being helpless once our votes are cast, and the struggle to change an outdated constitution that gives ultimate power to one man or woman, leaving us with no choice but to resort to unconventional methods of self-representation. Ladies and gentlemen, to discuss this issue further, I have the pleasure of having with me today Mr. Terence Budhai, a resident and original member of the Debe to San Francisco Action Committee created by Dr. Rudal Munilal and current member of the Highway Reroute Movement. Good afternoon, good evening, my friend.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. I must say that although this must be an extremely challenging time for you and the group, I want to congratulate you and every single member who has continued to fight tirelessly against the maximum power of the state. When it was the PNM and now the People's Partnership, it could not be easy, especially when you have issues of funds and discrimination and everything really against you. Terence, tell me, I think our first job here today, on the ground, and perhaps throughout the nation, whilst a lot of people understand, I still believe that the Highway Reroute movement has been misunderstood. And because of that, I want you, as a member, to clarify certain things. And I want to begin with, my dear, by saying, first question, is the Highway Reroute movement against the Point Fortin to San Fernando Highway? My first question to you.
Well, that is something that we have been very clear about, Michaela, from the start, even from the days of the Debe to San Francisco Action Committee. The Highway Reroute movement has never been against the highway project as a whole. In particular, the San Fernando to Point Fortin Highway, we have continually supported, even with the past administration and continuing into this administration. We have always said, and we continue to maintain, that the movement supports the San Fernando to Point Fortin Highway, as we believe it is a necessary conduit to connect all of those communities along the Creek Road heading into La Brea, into Point Fortin.
And for growth and development.
Down to that area.
Yes.
In particular. It is the contentious Debe to Mondesi segment of this highway that the movement has been lobbying against since 2005, 2006. So the struggle is almost nine years on, really. It is this 9.1 mile segment between Debe and Mondesi that will be running through 300 homes, that will be running through 13 communities, causing dislocation of families, extended families, brother from brother, sister from sister, family, the elderly, having impacts on them. So there are huge social consequences to this project. Additionally, the highway will be built on an embankment 2 to 3 meters in height across the Opuch Lagoon. That is going to have consequences on the hydrological flows, meaning the flow of water into and out of the lagoon. And there will be serious consequences for flooding. Now, this is a matter we brought up from the start. It was one of the key issues. The area between Debe to Mondesi is a naturally low-lying area, many parts of it actually being below sea level. So it tends to collect water naturally. What they are doing with a 2 to 3 meter embankment running across the lagoon is it's going to have impacts. And one of the recommendations coming out of the Armstrong report, which I'm sure we will get to discuss later on.
We're going to go into, here's what I want us to do, because I think it is so important. Yes, you could have been saying it for 9 years, by certain acts that we see happening, the second hunger strike, people are now listening. So they're listening. We're making it clear. Your movement is not against the San Fernando to Point Fortin to San Fernando Highway, but is against a segment, the Debe to Mondesir segment, 9 miles, 9.5 miles, you see. Is it possible for the viewers that you can show us at least an illustration of what this is? Something visual always helps us. Can you show us?
Right, so I have a map here. Firstly, so let me show the original proposal by the government.
Wonderful.
Right, so this is the original proposal.
If we could have a look.
Right. I don't know how straight this is, but...
yeah, that looks good there, yes.
Right. So here we have San Fernando in this region here, right?
Right.
And we have Point Fortin down to the end here.
All the way at the end of the green.
At the green line.
Right.
So for the San Fernando to Point Fortin highway is shown in green, and this is the highway that we have said we continue to support.
You support that, wonderful, yes.
The Golconda to Debe highway, this other line in green here that I point out, has already been constructed.
It has, yes. I live around that area.
Right.
Yes, there we go, that's better. Yes.
So the red line shown here is the Debe to Mondesi highway segment, right? Okay. So it is running across the lagoon, and there are several communities, 300 homes in this area.
Okay.
Now, as an alternative to the Debe to Mondesi segment, so it's not that we are simply against the Debe to Mondesi segment. We have actually come up with a proposal that will allow all of the communities between Faizabad, Siparia, Pinal, and Debe to seamlessly connect into the highway network. And that is why I have this second map, which shows our new proposal.
Yes.
Called the Optimum Connectivity Proposal.
Okay, so tell me first of all, what is the San Fernando to Point Fortin highway? The big, long, red
line.
Nice.
Right, that goes across here towards the top.
Lovely.
Right. This other red line is the Golconda to Debe.
Which is already built, yes.
Which is already built, right? So our proposal is to reroute this Debe to Mondesi segment across from Debe through empty former Caroni lands and join it with the San Fernando to Point Fortin highway.
And it will join at where a lot of us who are from south will know by where Paria Suites.
Right, close to, right?
Close to where Paria Suites
is.
Yes.
Now, the thing about this particular route is that, number one, it is quite short.
A lot shorter than the original proposal.
Right.
So I would assume, although I'm not a technocrat in this area, it would cost less.
It would cost less. It would cost less. In particular, this route has no residents. It is empty former Caroni lands.
No one will be displaced.
No dislocation of homes, businesses, families, and so on. The social impacts, virtually none. It would also not run across the lagoon. This is highland. This is basically hilly highland just outside of the lagoon. So therefore, it will not be passing through the Oropouche Lagoon.
Okay.
The Debe to Mondesi segment, because it is a low-lying area, is going to require fantastic amounts of aggregate, according to the government's proposal and their CEC
and by
application.
Aggregate, you mean
gravel, sand, filling.
Because for a short time, I was a member of Parliament for Oropouche West. One of our major concerns were flooding.
Right.
As it exists already. So you're saying this is going to compound this.
That
and
problem.
You're going to, so of course a lot of money will have to perhaps go into filling of the land.
Right, because according to the CC application, 1.4 million tons of aggregate coming from the Northern Range or Valencia or wherever they are sourcing this is going to have to be sourced and filled. You will not require that for this hilly land.
So if I were to ask you, we're happy here, we're happy here, not a problem, we've already built here, we're simply saying instead of joining here, we just want to...
Exactly.
That's it. That's what you want. That's where you want it to be
well,
rerouted to.
that is part of the proposal.
Right.
So what this means is that people using the Solomon Ho Choi can basically link up.
A lot earlier.
Yes.
A lot earlier, yes.
To get down to Point Fortin, right? It links with the San Fernando to Point Fortin Highway.
Sure.
Now, recently, we've augmented or improved our proposal to come up with this optimum connectivity, as we call it.
Okay.
Now, the state has already begun, unfortunately, construction starting from Debe. That's this green line, this area
So
here.
that's begun already?
That has begun already. They've already started filling it, right?
Right.
So as a sort of compromise on our position, and given that most, if not all, of these properties along this region here, along the right of way, they have been acquired by the state. It belongs to the state.
Lawyers made a lot of money to do that, by the way, but
Yes.
that's another point.
Right. So seeking to take advantage of that, we've proposed that a 2-lane main road start from Debe and go through these communities here and link up with the SS Erin Road beyond Pinal. Now, what that means is it is a sort of Pinal bypass road, if you will. The main area of traffic along the SS Erin Road that people complain about in the Debe-Pinal region lies between Debe and Pinal along this purple route here.
Yes.
People coming off the highway and into Debe can therefore use this route to bypass Pinal and therefore get onto the SS Erin Road where it is a lot less congested, where there's freer flow of traffic, to get into Siparia. So therefore Siparia will have easy connectivity into the highway network.
But we want to make it very clear to the viewers, you have not abandoned your alternative route.
That
very
remains
important.
part of our proposal.
You're simply saying, because so much they have gone in already and so much has been done, so as not to waste money already spent,
Right.
that's how we were going to deal with it.
Exactly. The good thing about this route as well is that you see all these gray lines, these squiggly lines throughout the region. They really represent the rich connectivity of existing roads between Debe and Mondesir, and even east of Debe Pinal into the Bagpo area. These roads can seamlessly link into this main road. This main road is not going to be built meters above the other roads. It is going to fit into the general road architecture. It is going to be built at the same height as well as width as the surrounding roads. So therefore, these roads can therefore link into this main road and get onto the... So all these communities, these villages here in the Debe Pinal region can link and get onto the highway. From here to here will take 10 minutes at most to drive through. It is a short distance. This here is a scale on the map. It's 2 kilometers. We're looking at the region of 5 to 6 kilometers from here to here. Yeah?
Okay. All right. For the viewers, Terence, if we could come back a second, my dear.
Yeah.
Clearly, this is now called the optimum connectivity proposal. You've almost adjusted it from your original proposal because so much work has already been done.
Right.
Okay? I think people can understand, and it's pretty straightforward. One, you're not against the San Fernando Point Fortin Highway. Then what you were against was the route that the government, the PNM government at that time, and now the People's Partnership, is choosing to go, is so disruptive socially, environmentally, costly, economically, that you were simply discussing and wanting to discuss with the Prime Minister, Kamala Prasad-Bissessa, an alternative route. And that's something that I wanted to discuss with you, because I think a lot of it gets lost in the technicality.
Right.
I think a lot of it gets lost in the drama, and the wonderful people like yourself are forgotten. And I am so happy that you would come, so we put a face to someone who is being affected. Now, I want to make it clear, because people think that this second hunger strike just sort of flipped out of the air, and that is contrary to anything, because I know, having witnessed it, read about it, seen it, visited different camps myself. Since the People's Partnership assumed governance, and you just tell me if this is correct, and if it is incorrect, because I've been reading a lot of things, you can correct me.
Right.
Your group has been your main thing, because you've just explained that to our viewing public, our listening public, has been to secure a meeting with the Prime Minister. Secure a meeting with the Prime Minister to explain to the Prime Minister exactly what you just did in 10 minutes. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, of course, you could go into a lot of depth scientifically. You know, we're not technocrats, as I said. I'm definitely not, and I know the viewing public isn't. But to simply have a meeting, and what you've been doing is, because I'm doing some research on you and your group, the group has been sending numerous letters. They've gotten no responses. You have met with several government ministers to facilitate a meeting with the Prime Minister.
Yes.
Nothing ever materialized. Until February 25th, 2012, some 2 years later after the People's Partnership assumed government, your group hand-delivered a letter to the private residence of the Prime Minister. In response to that, the Prime Minister, who as we know, and for the viewing public, is the head of the committee who oversees the construction of the highway, redirected your concerns to Minister Warner, the then Minister of Works and Infrastructure, and Minister Rudal Munilal, both of who simply responded to you that they were in support of the debate of the debate to Mondasir section. I want to I know that you have done so many things, hundreds of things, court cases, all sorts of different things before. But I want to just get something clear. Has anyone sat with you to discuss it? Has your fight even really perhaps not even begun because you haven't had the opportunity to get a meeting with the Prime Minister as the head of the committee overseeing the construction of the highway? Have you been able to do that? Because I do see, please forgive me, that at some stage you did meet with the Prime Minister on March the 16th, 2012.
Right.
So can you tell me, that's 2 years later, can you tell me something about that?
Right. So we protested in front of the Prime Minister's office, the Office of the Prime Minister in St. Clair, on March the 15th, 2012.
Correct.
She having not responded to our letters starting from February 2012, like you said, we were able to secure a meeting with her and some key members of the cabinet at the time, Minister Warner, Munilal, and so on.
Yes.
On the 16th. In that meeting, the Prime Minister, she committed to halt works on the Debate to Mondesi segment.
Yes.
And to conduct a review.
A technical review, and also
to halt works.
Have consultation. So halt works, stop works.
Right.
Whilst there's a technical review, and we start talking to the residents.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about that meeting. Did you at any moment say, Madam Prime Minister, you know, we've been talking about this since the PNM was there, you know, and everybody was in support of us. You've come to our meetings. We haven't actually changed. But just in case you've forgotten, and show her what the plan was, did you get the opportunity to do that?
There was the opportunity. We actually had maps and so on to present. I have to say that meeting, it was antagonistic, if I could use that word. I think the government did not receive us very well.
Why do you think so, dear? Because they were the people who were giving you the support in 2010. I mean, prior to 2010, I was there from 2007 to 2010, and I know very, very well, because the San Francisco area is our area, that Dr. Munilal was at the forefront of this. Why wasn't it received well? What went wrong?
Well, something happened between the time that they supported us to the time that they assumed government.
They got into government.
In 2010. So there was, and once they got into government, there was obviously a change in direction in terms of their thinking.
Well, was it a change in direction of their thinking? Or, well, of course it was, to the direction of what the PNM was thinking. Okay.
And also, there was not much communication from the government on the issue once they got into government. In fact, residents thought, having gotten the promise from the opposition at the time.
Celebrating. I mean, they said, well, listen, this is good. This is one of the greatest.
We were very happy, and as a result of that, the residents never even challenged the CEC, trusting that the government would have fulfilled its promise. So I think there's
Certificate of environmental clearance.
Yes.
If you didn't challenge it, forgive me because I don't know, there is a time period to appeal that perhaps would have closed.
Yes, the 6-month period as well. Yes, that period would have closed already.
So you were really left
high and dry, so to
high
speak.
and dry, so to say. Okay, tell me something there. I want to just do a quick build-up because I know time is of the essence, but it is so important, and I want to bring another guest on just briefly before you leave. But it's important to hear from someone who lives there. It's important to hear from someone who is afraid, someone who has a concern, someone who has been living this for 9 years, so that the public can put a face to the maps,
right,
to give a human face to the maps. Tell me, dear, the Prime Minister said we're going to halt these works. But a month later, in April 2012, she went back on her word, and the state entered the lands at Debe with heavy machinery. In fact, they broke down your camp.
Yes.
And I always remember Dr. Munilal saying that he was so pleased with how strong-handedly you guys were dealt with. He said that perhaps you need to reroute your camp, and he somehow thought that was funny. Also, although I didn't catch the joke, I found it offensive. That being said, since the group has then again not been able to meet with the Prime Minister to say, well, Lady Prime Minister, what has happened? You know, you told us you were not going to do this. You've continued to protest, court actions, all these things to name. I mean, and I know this has been going on for ages. And then you get frustrated, and hence comes the first hunger strike. Talk to me a bit about that so that we can remind the viewing public. The first hunger strike.
Right, so the state entered into lands at Faizabad, where the Faizabad interchange is supposed to be.
Right,
At the time, we had, for months, we had attempted letters, diplomatic actions, attempts to meet. We had protested a few times, actually, by that time. We had already started proceeding with legal action. And we were at a point where it seemed that you know, we were butting our heads against a wall.
Desperate.
We were desperate. Dr. Kublal Singh took the stance that he was going to do a hunger strike in order to get the Prime Minister in particular to honor her promise that she had made in March 2012. The hunger strike was in November, and to halt works. Of course, that was never done. They proceeded to enter into lands and break down the camp and so on. So Dr. Kublal Singh took that stance as a form of protest, as a stance to stand up for residents, for integrity, for justice for people. Because at the end of the day, Michaela, this has been a huge travesty of justice, I feel. It has been the type of words and the actions that have been perpetrated against, I mean, these are normal residents, communities that have been long-standing for 3-4 generations.
And people who don't know themselves what to do. And I've got to stick this in, I must do. Since we've started this program a year ago, we ourselves have been saying, this is the problem that people face. They do not know what to do, whilst people are jeering, and, you know, we have members of parliament ridiculing Mr. Kublal Singh. And I'm not saying whether he's right or wrong. That's not for me. Some people think it's right. Some people think he's wrong. He's standing up for something. And he's doing this because in his mind, in the mind of the movement, that there's nothing they can do again. They cannot hold the government account. They couldn't do it with the PNM, and now they cannot do it with the People's Partnership. How do you get the Prime Minister of a country to keep to her word? She gave your movement the word. That is, we're going to halt works. It took a first hunger strike because she had gone against her word. So then what happened? Because I know it ceased.
Right, so several civil society groups stepped in to break the deadlock at the time after 21 days. So you had the JCC, Fighton, Working Women's Group.
Working Women's Group, yes.
A host of groups that approached the government with a proposal in order to solve the impasse. And as a result of that meeting with the government and the Ministry of Works, it was agreed that a committee of 19 experts, chaired by, at the time, independent Senator James Armstrong,
Yes.
they would sit, look at all of the documentation, look at all of the facts for 60 days, and come up with some sort of solution or recommendations. At the end of 60 days, they came up with 10 recommendations concerning the Davie to Mondesi segment.
Yes.
And if you would allow me to elucidate a couple of them.
Yes, yes, of course. We need to go for a break, obviously. But just for an introduction to what we're going to briefly go into, the report, ladies and gentlemen, recommended that the state stop the controversial section for a proper review of its social, economic, and environmental impacts, and that future governments approach mega projects and the citizenry in a different manner. We need to take a break now, ladies and gentlemen. Please join us in a couple of minutes.